Welcome to U.S. Law Shield live report from the news desk in Houston, Texas. I'm Sam Malone. Thanks for joining us for our program today, broadcast on Facebook Live. As always, when we get through the content and we're going through the questions and such, leave your comments, leave your questions on the Facebook page. Obviously, you're watching it right now, Texas Law Shield, and we'll try to get to them and share them with our program attorney. Independent program attorney, U.S. Law Shield. Say hi to Michele Byington joining us today. Hello, Michele.
Hey, Sam.
All right, listen, a lot of attention was paid on the Supreme Court and Donald Trump and his immigration policies and things like that. But there was a big Second Amendment story that most of the media didn't cover. I want to talk about with you today. I'll read a little bit from the Los Angeles Times of the story and then get ready. And folks, get ready to leave your comments. It said the Supreme Court rejected a major Second Amendment challenge to California's strict limits on carrying concealed guns in public. The justices, by a vote of 7-2, turned away an appeal from gun rights advocates who contended that most law-abiding gun owners in San Diego, Los Angeles, and the San Francisco Bay Area were being wrongly denied permits to carry a weapon when they leave home. The justices let stand a ruling from the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, which held last year that the Second Amendment does not preserve or protect a right of a member of the general public to carry concealed firearms in public. Holy Fragoli! You are the independent program attorney, U.S. Law Shield. Walk us through this. Because I'm not familiar with the gun laws, for instance, in San Fran. Go.
Okay, so we need to do a little bit of history here real quick. So several years ago, the Supreme Court ruled in two very, very important Second Amendment cases. One was called Heller, and then the next one was called McDonald. And those two cases said, hey, guess what? The Second Amendment is a right that all Americans have, and that right means that a person has the right to self-defense by way of a firearm when they use that firearm in the home. Okay, and that's where Heller and McDonald basically stopped, was that you have a right to self-defense by firearm in the home. It didn't go any further. And so many of us have been sitting on pins and needles waiting for the perfect case that came there in California. In this case that you were referring to is called Peruta. And that Peruta case is basically what all Second Amendment advocates have been waiting on. We need these sort of facts to go before the U.S. Supreme Court, so then the U.S. Supreme Court can expand on their Heller and McDonald decision to say, hey, guess what? The Second Amendment also applies to carrying firearms out in public, not just the home, but also public, for the purpose of self-defense. However, we all got our heart broken yesterday when the Supreme Court denied certiorari, which means that they are denying to review this case. Now, what this means is that the Ninth Circuit, basically, they have their own little fiefdom, their own little messed up kingdom now of anti-gun rights. And basically, in my opinion, they're legislating from the bench, and this is absolutely something that the Supreme Court should have heard. But basically now in the Ninth Circuit, which covers California, they strongly believe that the Second Amendment does not extend to the right to carrying firearms out in public for the purpose of self-defense.
I'm not the brightest bulb in the chandelier, Michele. You know that every week. I just prove it every week by talking to you. But isn't the right to keep and bear arms, right? Not just to keep them and have them stored. It doesn't bear to hold, to carry, to have upon one's person, to bear, right?
To wear, bear, carry, possess, have under my control.
Okay.
Yes.
So how is it that, I'm going to read this verbatim, the Second Amendment, this is from the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, the Second Amendment does not preserve or protect a right of a member of the general public, that's like me, to carry concealed firearms in public. That would be like freedom of religions, but not all religions. You know, freedom of religion, but not your religion.
Could you imagine this sort of thing happening with the First Amendment, with freedom of speech, freedom of religion, and freedom of right to assembly? It's unheard of. There is no other amendment under such attack by the courts than the Second Amendment. And this is, the perfect example. And it's just, and actually the Peruta decision that the Ninth Circuit came down with, the opinion relies on Old English law from the 1500s, where a judge back in the 1500s in England said citizens don't have a right to carry firearms in public. They dug deep. They went to bottom of the barrel in making this decision because, I mean, it is, in my humble opinion, unconstitutional what the Ninth Circuit did, and it's too bad that the Supreme Court chose to dismiss this away. However, there is one sort of silver lining here, in that Justices Clarence Thomas and Justice Neil Gorsuch did issue a dissent stating that, hey, guys, we don't agree with the rest of our coworkers here, and we believe that the Supreme Court should have heard this. So for those of us who are wondering how Neil Gorsuch would have come down on a gun case, we now can, say he's pro-gun guy.
Amazing. Don't forget to leave your comments on our Facebook page. Right now, as we're doing it on Facebook Live, Michele Byington, our go-to brilliant attorney, independent program attorney with U.S. Law Shield. And I'm going to read some more. Once again, we are in Houston, Texas, a great red state, a pro-Second Amendment state. But in California, it says California law says law-abiding owners may obtain a permit to carry a concealed weapon if they show, quote, good cause, right? The state law is enforced by the county sheriffs in San Diego, Los Angeles, and other urban counties. Sheriffs have set a high bar for what qualifies as, quote, good cause, such as a particular need for protection. Simply fearing for one's personal safety is not considered a good cause. All right, what?
Not good enough, Sam.
What? So you have to go to the sheriff's office, I guess, to fill out your permit there out in San Diego, the great Ron Burgundy, or somewhere else. And they go, what's your reason? You go, well, I live in an area, it's kind of rough and tumble, and there's some bad people.
Yeah, it's so sad. Nope.
I know, right? Well, they hand me like a flyer for a U-Haul to move?
It's really unbelievable, because it's almost like the sheriff department is saying, you know what, get your crystal ball out and get that crystal ball out and ask whether you are going to be the victim of a violent crime today. And if it says yes, then you know what, maybe we will issue a permit. However, if you were just going to bring to me common sense and statistics and all sorts of other logical arguments that we need the right to carry to defend ourselves, then nope, we don't see a need for that. And what this is doing is it's allowing the circuit courts to basically decide whether you have a Second Amendment right to carry or not. And that is a sad state of affairs.
And also, Michele Byington, independent program attorney, U.S. Law Shield, where does it say in the Second Amendment the right to keep and bear arms shall be decided by Fred over there? Right? Isn't that a personal relationship in the Constitution, that it's my right of free speech, my right to exercise religion, freedom of the press? I'm not an attorney. I'm just saying. But I don't see any in the small print where it says it's up to some other person.
Well, unfortunately, Sam, you're using your common sense, and there's no room for that sometimes when it comes to the law. And you're exactly right. Unfortunately, the Second Amendment is not an absolute right that is without sort of limitations. Limitations such as you got to have a permit to carry out in public. And we have that here in Texas. It's not this carte blanche right where we are able to have what's called a constitutional carry state where anybody can go out and carry a gun in public without a license. Unfortunately, it does come with some limitations, and the Supreme Court has said that. Do I agree with the Supreme Court on this issue? No, not really. But unfortunately, it's not me making the decisions. But yeah, when you read the Second Amendment and it says that, shall not be infringed, what does that sound like to you? Sounds like to me that nobody should be able to mess with it or interpret it in some sort of obnoxious way that doesn't make sense. However, unfortunately, that is what we are seeing.
I think that the word infringed, the capital I in infringe, is being colored in here by the Ninth Circuit by trying to reinterpret or somehow see it under their foggy glasses. And here's the other problem. It doesn't match the rest of the country. So yeah. We now have one of the Bill of Rights, the number 2, the big deuce, is now being interpreted in a way that's not open and not fulfilling to gun owners.
Correct. And it's not taking the plain language of the Second Amendment and and carrying that sort of spirit and even just the plain words out, it's completely backwards.
Is there any, you're an attorney, I'm just asking you, but God forbid somebody says, I need a gun, and they said, sorry, you need to state a really good reason, and they become a victim of a crime. Does that person have any recourse against the county sheriffs there who denied them?
I would love to take that case. Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, there's all sorts of potential liability there that a person could bring because, hey, you stopped me from protecting myself, therefore you should be liable for the damages that I incurred, assuming that, you survive. And let's also remember that criminals, they don't follow the law. And so what they're actively doing is disarming the law-abiding citizen.
Right.
And they're not going to make any difference in the criminal who wants to get his hands on a gun and use it for awful purposes.
All right, let me write this down. Criminals don't follow the law. I just want to make sure I get this.
Breaking news.
Okay.
Newsflash.
So drug dealers, gang members, gas station robbers. So what you're saying is, they don't follow the rules. They don't follow the law. They don't really care about these things.
I know, it's a bizarre world. Yeah. No, certainly not. And I doubt they're reading the Ninth Circuit's opinion. If I had to guess.
Okay, so let me ask you this, Michele Byington, independent program attorney, U.S. Law Shield. When can people in California look for some sort of relief? When can real Americans who reside in San Diego or Los Angeles or whatever, or San Francisco, when can they look forward to getting some sort of support or relief? Do you have to wait another couple of years?
They're going to have to vote out the legislators they've got. They need to, one of the best quotes I heard was that all politics is local, and that you need to look at your local governments and look at who you're electing and who is making these sorts of decisions. So be very, very active in your local politics and vote in the people who are going to allow you to protect yourself and not take the stance of, you know what, you should be dependent on the government. You need to be dependent on me, the sheriff. You gotta get involved in your local politics to make a real change here.
Okay, let's see. People of Southern California becoming pro-Second Amendment. Let's see when that'll happen.
It may be a pipe dream, but,
That's so sad. And once again, folks, it puts the burden on us, the gun owners, those who embrace the Second Amendment, that if you're going to travel or you're going to other areas, it's up to you to get it all squared away. That's why we're so happy to have U.S. Law Shield and Texas Law Shield. Go to uslawshield.com. I see one of the comments is, I need a phone number to your firm for perhaps legal representation. As I would say, go to uslawshield.com, or if you're in Texas, texaslawshield.com. But uslawshield.com, become part of the family. And this is where it's all about the educational process. Gosh forbid you ever have to draw your weapon and use it. But you need to know all of the ins and outs. Traveling by car, traveling by plane. Are you bringing your gun with you on vacation? Where can you keep it? where can't you keep it? And it's not like every place is as loving as Texas.
Far from it. I mean, yeah, if you find yourself having to go to a family reunion there in San Diego, you may have to leave your guns at home, which is, a terrifying journey for many of us.
But at least when you get there at the home of Ron Burgundy and the News 4 team, you're in good hands. But
you're saying.
I've
seen their gang fights. It's pretty good.
You can tie Anchorman into any conversation. You know that. That and Blazing Saddles. So go to uslawshield.com, and if you just tuned in part of this, just wait a second. It'll start all over, and we'll talk about Second Amendment rights, or the lack of rights, and what happened yesterday with our United States Supreme Court. As always, got to thank Michele Byington, independent program attorney, U.S. Law Shield, for being on with us via Skype today on our Facebook Live broadcast. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Sam.
And for any questions, like I said, go to uslawshield.com. At the news desk in Houston, Texas, I'm Sam Malone.